Welcome back. Welcome to another fireside chat with Brad. Out here celebrating St. Patrick's Day, drinking some scotch today rather than an Irish whiskey. Thought I'd mix it up. And in honor of the holiday, I thought I would share with you some fun history about Larry the Legend Bird. Because, well, he was a Celtic. I don't know why they call the team the Celtics, not Celtics, but that's how it's pronounced for the sports team. Now, I was not a Bird fan as a kid. I hated Larry Bird because he always beat my Detroit Pistons. But I have become a huge Larry Bird fan as an adult, largely from reading books about him, his own autobiography, Drive, which is phenomenal, and just from watching a series of documentaries. Larry Bird was a crazy, humorous, and strange individual. He's worth exploring. Like I said, his autobiography, Drive, is well worth a read. But I'm just going to share with you a couple quick stories in honor of St. Patrick's Day and the Celtics. Not really a Celtics fan, but when else am I going to talk about Larry Bird? Okay, so here's a couple things about Larry Bird that you may or may not know. He's called Larry Legend for a reason. Any NBA player who played with Larry Bird will tell you he was one of the most notorious shit talkers. Okay, he knew how to talk smack, and he would say all kinds of things. So much so that he became legendary for this. Some of the ones you've probably heard before was when he showed up for the three-point contest and said, all right, who's coming in second? In the locker room before the three-point contest took place, and of course he went out and won it, and he won it several years in a row. No one could touch him on that three-point contest, which is interesting because Larry Bird didn't even fashion himself a three-point shooter, although he ended up being phenomenal at it. When Larry Bird came into the league, the Celtics, who had traditionally been one of the more dominant franchises in the league in the Bill Russell era, had actually floundered, and they had a terrible, terrible record. After Larry Bird's rookie season, they, I think it was like about a 60 game increase in wins. I don't remember the exact numbers. I'm drinking scotch here, people. But what I can tell you, it was the largest turnaround in a single season in the history of the NBA, and that record still stands. Cedric Maxwell, his teammate at the time, actually believed, like many of the players at the time, that Larry Bird was only drafted because he was a marketing scheme. The NBA was facing a lot of backlash because it was a primarily black league, an African-American league. Most of the stars in the league were African-American, and people in that time, this is in the late 70s, early 80s, didn't feel like it would be marketable to white audiences. This is widely publicized. It just shows how racist things were then. I mean, it's still problematic now, but at least we've made some progress. So they thought Bird was really not as good as he was, and that he was essentially being brought into the league and sort of championed as a new superstar just because he was white. They called him the Great White Hope until Bird showed up. And Cedric Maxwell tells a story of how Bird came in camp and basically just dominated everyone. Maxwell ended up getting on the phone and calling people like, yo, no, this dude's legit. So something you should also know about Larry Bird, he ended up suffering a very serious back injury mid-career. That was not widely known until after he retired. If you look at his career numbers, they do kind of trail off mid-career. They're still world-class numbers, but a lot of people just thought that, maybe he was tapering off in his quality of play. But the reality is he had a serious back injury. And the story of the back injury itself is a really interesting story also. But that was not known. If you look at prior to that, Larry Bird was so dominant that he was winning the MVP repeatedly. I think he won it 3 times in a row. Was the only person to ever do that other than Bill Russell. Okay, I don't know if anyone's ever done that since. So doing crazy stuff. Some of my favorite Larry Bird stories are this. One.
The bird can fly away from the bubble.
Okay.
So that.
In the NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers, actually Byron Scott tells a story of it was a close game. The Lakers were leading, and the Celtics had the ball with only a few seconds left on the clock. Larry Bird comes out of the timeout, walks over to the Lakers, and tells them the shot he's going to take. He's like, hey, who's guarding me? I'm going to get the ball. I'm going to come right over here. I'm going to shoot it, and I'm going to win the game. And then he did exactly what he said. Byron Scott's like, he literally told us what he was going to do, and he did it. That was how Larry Legend was. Ruthless. So some other stories I like about Larry Bird is, the way that he originally, I guess you could say, met Magic Johnson. Larry Bird had had a long history with Magic Johnson. They played each other in the national NCAA championship in college, to which Larry Bird lost to Magic. And then, of course, they were readily pitted against each other in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, creating the greatest rivalry in the history of sports, the Lakers versus the Celtics. But they never really personally interacted. So it turns out Larry Bird in the offseason would go back to his hometown in Indiana, and he'd actually built a farm there. And the reason he actually got his back injury mid-career is because he decided to put in a basketball court. Now, rather than hire someone, this is Larry Bird at the height of his career, he decided to do it himself. So he dug this whole court, laid all the gravel himself, and in the process threw out his back. And it was actually that back injury that substantially limited his career after that. But at this time, this is when Michael Jordan had come out with his Air Jordans in Nike, and Jordan had become a new young phenom, and Converse, who had traditionally been the predominant basketball shoe, was sort of frustrated by the popularity that Jordan brought to Nike, as was Magic Johnson, who was, at that point in time, the most popular player in the league. So as a result of this, both Magic Johnson and Converse decided to create a shoe for Magic Johnson to compete with the Jordan. Now, both Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and several other NBA All-Stars like Isaiah Thomas, so et cetera, all had contracts with Converse, and they had a shoe called the Fast Break, which they would wear. But Magic wanted his own shoe, and they wanted to do this deal with him and Larry Bird. But when they contacted Larry Bird had zero interest in being involved with selling a product. And so they wanted to do this ad campaign, and Bird's like, yeah, no, I'm not interested, I don't care about that. He went off to Indiana and just made his basketball court. So Converse contacted Magic and was like, hey, look, Bird, we can't get Bird on board with this. He's not interested. So Magic's like, oh, man. He's like, let me call Larry and see what I can do. Now, mind you, Larry and Magic did not have a good rapport at this point. They hated each other. So Magic gets on the phone, and he's just like, look, he's like, this is a big deal. We need to do this. I want to do this. It's a huge shoe contract. It's an opportunity for free money. What do I need to do? What do we need to do to make this happen? And Larry Bird's like, well, I'm not leaving my house. So if you guys want to make the commercial, you can come out here to my farm. So that's what they did. And you can go on YouTube, Google the ad. It's a classic ad if you grew up in the era, but essentially it features Magic Johnson, and the way that they pitted this is they sort of played into the stereotypes in the historical narrative of that time. Magic pulls in a limousine, Larry's out shooting on his actual gravel court in Indiana, and Magic's like, hey, I'm the MVP of the league, I got my own shoe, blah, 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 blah. And they challenge each other to a one-on-one match. Now, the two of them didn't actually know if they're really going to legitimately play a one-on-one battle. And they were both apparently down for it. But then the ad campaign, the people at Converse were like, no, this is just for show. So like, oh, okay. And apparently after that, the mood lightened. They kind of shot around and did the ad. And then it was all over, and Magic went to leave, and Larry Bird's like, where are you going? He's like, oh, I'm done. He's like, no. You got to come back to the house. Mom made lunch. Magic's like, what? So Larry Bird takes Magic Johnson back to his house, and his mom has made a full spread lunch for Magic and all the people. And so at this point, Magic Johnson is forced to sort of sit down with Larry Bird and his family and eat lunch. And as time goes by and they start talking, they realize that they actually have a lot more in common. And Magic explains, Larry, I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. Like I'm from Michigan, man. I grew up working on my dad's trash company. We ran trash throughout Lansing. I came from a family like a bazillion kids. I worked jobs through high school, and then they actually hit it off. And the two of them end up becoming really tight after that. So much so that when Magic ended up having to make his announcement about the HIV virus, which was very controversial at that time, and a scenario where a lot of the NBA players were not supportive, the first person to call him was actually Larry Bird. And when the Dream Team actually emerged and they actually asked Magic to come back and play, Magic's only stipulation was, I want to play with Larry Bird. Because he said, the one thing I've always dreamed about and I've always wanted to do is throw a pass to Larry Bird and watch him drain a three-pointer. And what no one knew at that time, but Magic knew and Larry Bird knew, was that Bird's back injury had gotten so severe that he was extremely riddled and unable to play. Those of you who were around and watched that Dream Team play, you remember that most of that entire Olympic run, just a second, buddy, Bird was seen lying on the sidelines because he couldn't play. But he did play the first game, and he did get the pass from Magic, and he did make that 3-point shot. And after that, he's like, all right, Magic, you got what he wanted. And he kind of pulled himself from the game. But this leads me to a couple other of my favorite stories about Larry Bird. And I'll try to make it quick because I've already gone on from 10 minutes. One, besides him being injured, the other player that was injured was Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing was also known for being a bit of a stoic. Just a second, buddy. Listen, I'm talking, okay? Just listen. Okay, I'll show you in a minute. Patrick Ewing was also known for being a bit of a curmudgeon and kind of a stoic. Didn't talk much, didn't interact a lot with other people, kind of a loner, kept to himself. And he was also injured. And so while the other players were playing and practicing the Dream Team, both Larry Bird and Patrick Ewing would spend their time on the sidelines, essentially on recumbent bikes, loosening up and warming up and stretching. And so everyone's looking at these two guys, both knowing their kind of histories and their attitudes, wondering what they're going to be like and how they're going to get along. Turns out they became also best friends. Once Patrick Ewing got to know Larry Bird, he fell in love with the man. And the two of them started sitting on the sidelines, injured. Just a second, buddy, I'm talking. Essentially mocking all the other players, calling out all their errors and mistakes. They were like the Statler and Waldorf of the Dream Team. Apparently it's pretty funny that these two guys just sort of made this their new thing, and they became BFFs, and they ended up becoming drinking partners, and they would go out every night and drink beer, although Larry confronted Patrick one night at a bar when he got mad at Patrick Ewing because he kept ordering Heineken's, which Larry Bird said was too expensive. He's like, do you know how much these beers cost? Classic Larry Bird. But the last story of Larry Bird and the Dream Team that I want to share with you is, if you remember that time in the Olympics, it was a big deal. You know, these are the most popular players, the most famous players in the history of the sport. They're all together for the Olympics. They had a hotel, and they had massive security protecting this hotel. Magic Johnson apparently had like an entourage of like security guards and people everywhere he went to protect them going into this and out of this hotel. Larry Bird got fed up with this. He hated the tension. He hated the fact that everything was, closed and he couldn't get anywhere. And he was a lifelong baseball fan. Somewhat like Michael Jordan, Larry Bird always wanted to be a professional baseball player, but didn't have the skill sets for it. So he ended up choosing basketball as a sort of second option. And at that time, the USA baseball team. All right, go drink, buddy. The USA baseball team was also playing for the Olympics, and many of the players were professional superstars like the Dream Team in basketball. And Larry wanted to go watch a game. So finally he went to a member of the hotel and he says, like, what, this is ridiculous. Is there not like a back door where I can just leave? So the guy's like, yeah, there's a back door right around here. So Larry Bird, puts on a jacket, throws on a hat, walks out the back door, and ends up hopping on a transit bus that's transporting hotel members to the Olympic Games, in this case, the baseball game. So he hops on the bus with a group of other fans, some of them being American, there to see the Olympics, and he's sitting there, and this guy looks over at him, and he's like, are you Larry Bird? And he's like, yep. He's like, you going to the baseball game? He's like, yep. He's like, can I buy you a beer? And Bird's like, hell yeah. So anyways, Larry Bird ends up hanging out with these people for the entire game, drinking beer with them, and watch the baseball game. And then after it's over, they're like, Larry, same thing tomorrow? He's like, hell yeah. So for the rest of his time, when he's not playing with the Dream Team, he would meet up with these random Americans at this hotel, go out the back door, and go to the baseball game with them and drink beer. That's Larry Bird. Have a great day.